Hey, thanks for joining us on the Eat Crunchy podcast. We are three sisters on a journey towards healthy lives using Weight Watchers to get there. We'd love to hear about your journey as well on our Facebook page or at eatcrunchy.com.
Hey, everybody. It is Lisa and Rebecca and Heidi here, and we are so glad to be all together. It's been a while since we've had a podcast with all three of us, yeah?
At least a couple weeks?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For a while there, I thought I was just doing it alone. So anyway, I hope everybody listening, I hope you've had wonderful summers and things are going well. As we think about like our topic that we wanted to talk about today, for us to talk about the concept of leaving, when there are toxic situations, how do you be healthy in that situation, and when do you need to move like mad and get out of it, and what does it mean to kind of leave a toxic situation? I think, at least from my perspective, when I think about toxicity, I think that can be like a romantic relationship, it can be a friendship, it can be a partnership, it can be a work relationship. There's so many different ways that toxic people sometimes find their way into my life and different roles that they have. So what thoughts do you guys have about kind of managing things in a toxic situation or just plumb leaving it?
So I thought you were going to let me do my little explanation of where the idea came from. So I'm just going to jump in here.
All right.
So, the reason the topic came up, so without getting in tons of details, so I quit my job last week. It's one of those things that sort of came as a surprise after being there not very long and realizing that I was having this dread of going into work every day, and it just I feel like every ounce of my mind and my body was reacting to the fact that the situation was just, the only word I can think of is toxic. Now, again, I don't want to go into tons of detail because we do broadcast this, but just to say it was a bad situation. And I felt like I had to quit. I got to the point where I had to quit. And it's been interesting. I guess what I wanted to share was just the thoughts that I've had since then. So I came up here with all of this excitement about this new opportunity and being in the East Coast. And I was gung-ho with everything with health. And I was posting all this stuff about my weight loss efforts, and everything was going well. And then as the situation at work got worse and worse and worse, I feel like all of that other stuff got crowded out. And I was just listening to some of our older podcasts where I hear myself saying this. I'm like, I just don't have the bandwidth right now. I don't feel like doing things, and that, to help myself be healthy, I'm trying to focus on the other things that are stressing me out. I hear myself saying these words, and ever since I quit, and it's only been a few days, but all of a sudden I've had all of these motivational ideas come into my mind, and it's time to start, cooking healthy again and getting back on and exercising. And I've just had all of these motivations and all of these healthy thoughts that I didn't have for a few months. And so that, obviously, to me, that means it was the right decision. But what's interesting to me is how long it took me to realize that was the right decision, and sort of the concepts and I'm thinking back to other times in my life when there are things that have just been bad, toxic is the only word I can think of. But, when you have something like that in your life and you try to manage it versus just leaving it. And sometimes you just got to rip that Band-Aid and walk away. So that's the story. I don't know, Rebecca or Heidi, if you've ever had a situation like that, or, where you just had to rip something out of your life.
I think that toxic situations or a toxic relationship is just emotionally draining. You are it takes all of your emotional bandwidth to think of how to deal with this toxicity that you don't have the time to really devote to yourself or to what your actual needs are. There's a quote that says, and I don't remember the exact words, but basically, when you decide that you're going to love yourself enough, you start leaving everything that's not healthy. You leave people, you leave jobs, you start abandoning your own beliefs and habits if you discern that they aren't healthy. Anything that makes you feel like you're unlovable or unworthy, and that's when you really determine that you're going to love yourself, is that you start getting rid of the things that are toxic to you. And so I see myself as like when I've gone through situations where things are toxic, the times that I've like devoted myself back to me being like I'm worth it are the times that I've started ridding myself of those things that were emotionally draining.
I'm really focused on that quote that you gave, Heidi, because that's really powerful. I was thinking, I feel like I had a job before that I felt was toxic. Not just, there's a difference between a job that's not a good fit or a bad job and one that's toxic. So, and I feel like I've had a friendship or two in the past that have been really, really, really unhealthy to the point of being toxic. I think one of the things that's so hard about that is that being in that relationship, regardless of the nature of that relationship, it impacts how you see yourself. And I don't know, I feel like I start to see myself the way that the other person sees me, which is not an accurate representation of me.
Right.
And it muddles my ability to think as clearly about things. It takes a lot of emotional bandwidth. I feel like what's wrong with me as a person. I have a lot more self-doubt. And there's a clarity that I think that comes when you're able to walk away and kind of be reminded like, oh, I'm not a terrible person. I am actually valid and good and of worth. And I don't know, there's just this kind of fresh air that seems to come in sometimes that you didn't realize wasn't there beforehand.
Well, and also I think that there's something about, because a lot of these are relationship based, and it's something about that relationship is not even. There's something that you can't fix, or that you're not in a position to where you realize maybe you're not looking at it clearly, or the balance of power is such that it's not something that can be fixed. I mean, there's lots of reasons for it, but whatever it is, there's something that's not healthy where you're not standing up for yourself, or you're not feeling you can stand up for yourself. And then that's where a lot of that sort of, Rebecca, to your point, you start to view yourself differently, because then you start to rationalize. So you think about like people that have been in bad relationships, abusive relationships, right? And a lot of these things, maybe it's physical, there's physical abuse, but there's also emotional abuse. When you're in an abusive relationship and you're on the receiving end of that, you're thinking about like, well, maybe it's not that bad, or maybe I can deal with it later, because you're afraid to sort of confront, or for some reason you don't feel that you can confront the person that's treating you that way. And so a lot of the reasons that, sometimes you just have to find a way out of that is because it's not fixable. It's one thing if you're like, to your point about like some jobs just suck and other jobs are toxic, right? So like some jobs, it's like I've had jobs that I've hated going to work before, but I knew that I needed to be there, and, things changed eventually, but those weren't toxic. They were just sort of bad scenarios that we had to get through, right? There's a difference between that and just when you're leaving every day, or whatever it is that we're talking about, work or relationship or whatever, but where you're in a situation where every day you're starting to see yourself as not the person that you really are. I think that's significant, right?
Mm-hmm. And I think, so you were talking about abusive relationships and how it makes you feel. Like, I always think back of, I used to work at a job where I used to work with a lot of domestic violence situations. And I talked with a lot of domestic violence victims, and they'd be like, oh, if I just did this, then he would act differently. Or abusive people never question themselves. They don't ask if they're the problem. So it's not, the victim they're the only one questioning themselves. The abuser's not doing it, and that's why it can't be fixed, because they're abusive people are incapable of reflecting back on their behavior and thinking, well, how can I fix this problem?
Yeah.
And that's why I think things can be so toxic, is because that person is not willing to change. And so it's up to you to either leave because you finally recognize this as being a toxic situation, and that's really your only escape.
Well, I think in today's vernacular, we use the word bully a lot, that, kids get bullied. And I think that sometimes that word gets a little bit overused in situations. But I think what it comes down to, though, is what you were saying, Heidi, is that it's a form of abuse. There's some form of abuse that's happening, or that can happen in toxic relationships, whether it's physical or mental or emotional or spiritual or sexual. There's some sort of something that's happening that is disempowering to one person. And and finding a way to recognize that's what's happening and get out is such a struggle. And people spend years stuck in that cycle and in that trap, unable to kind of frozen almost, unable to move.
Right.
I'm wondering, Lisa, from your perspective, you talked about kind of leaving the situation that was toxic. What do you feel like empowered you to walk away from that? Because I think especially about a job, I mean, that's an income. It's how you pay for yourself. It's, it can be hard to walk away from that stability.
Well, I was just thinking about that because what comes to my mind is some of the people that I've known in my life, especially like younger girls who are in these toxic relationships, these romantic relationships, and you just want to find a way to say, you're so much more than this. Well, please leave, and it's really difficult when your identity is like sort of caught up in that. And I think especially when you're younger, right, you identify yourself so much. Well, some people identify themselves so much with the person that they're with, and so that I don't know the solution for that. I think for me it just got to the point where it was too much, and I feel like I'm lucky to have a sense of self and really good people to talk to, like you guys, who are sometimes, like Rebecca, you kept saying like, this is bad, Lisa. Like, so I feel like that feeling that you're having is a bad feeling every day. It's not a good feeling. So there's that. And I believe in, we're religious people. I believe in prayer. And so there's a lot of things that went into sort of helping me realize I needed to leave. And I'm really grateful that happened. But I do know, I can imagine a scenario where it's even more embedded. I was only there a little while, right? There's people that have been in relationships for long times and marriages and, that are abusive. And I don't feel like I came anywhere close to feeling that way. But I do kind of have a glimpse of like how hard it can be to speak up to somebody that you feel like they've got all the power. So I don't know, Rebecca. I think how do you tell somebody in that scenario, how do you help them realize who they are? For me, I mean, I already have a sense of self and independence, and I know who I am, so it's easy for me to see a distinction between how I know the kind of person that I know that I am, a capable person, and the way that somebody else is treating me differently than that. But I can understand the scenarios where people might not already have that sense of self so much.
Well, and I think about my first professional job that I had out of college. I considered that to be a place that was pretty toxic and really unhealthy in a lot of ways. And for me, in that role, I was there for about 3 years. I don't know that I knew that it was toxic to the point that it was beyond what other people experience in their work life. You hear people complain about their boss and the coworkers, or this thing that was kind of unsafe that was happening. And so, in my mind, what I was experiencing fell within the parameters of what other people were experiencing until I moved jobs to not a healthy environment, but not a toxic environment, just a less unhealthy environment. And when I got to my new job, I was like, oh my goodness. Oh, wow, that's amazing. And then when I left that job and I'm in the job that I'm in right now, we're spanning over a decade at this point. The job I have now has such a great work environment that I don't think I had any concept that what I'm experiencing now could have existed. And I think when you talked about, especially young people that are in unhealthy relationships, I wonder if sometimes that's the situation, that part of it is a sense of self and confidence in who you are as a person. But I wonder if part of it is not really being aware that what you're experiencing is not the right thing.
Right. Well, and just looking at like the aftershock of it, like I was saying before, aftershock, the consequences of leaving. I mean, I feel like I'm excited. I feel like, it's been a few months of just kind of just hunkering down and trying to survive. It's like being in survival mode. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh, I have hobbies. Oh, I want to be healthy. Oh, I want to do this. I want to do that. And so I think if you're not sure if you're in a toxic situation, maybe just paying attention to what are you focusing your mind on, and are you in survival mode, or are you growing in life? And if you're not, and I want to say too, there are times it's difficult, right? I mean, to your point, this was a job, so it's difficult to walk away from a job when you don't have another job. And I understand timing and things like that can be difficult, but But if you're not sure if that's the scenario that you're in, I feel like, you should, what is your mind, what is your emotion, what are your emotions telling you, what is your spirit telling you about how you're thinking about life? And if you're just not able to sort of focus on anything but this situation, and it just seems to permeate everything, you might be in a toxic situation.
You won't be able to grow if you're constantly being broken down.
Right, that's right.
And so when you think about growth, Lisa, you mentioned like having ideas. And I think the times that at my job now, the times that I feel like I'm energized, I have new ideas, I get excited about new projects, I have things that I want to do, I create these goals. The times that I'm like overwhelmed and burdened, all of that goes away. And the concept of putting your head down, I think, is a good analogy. You just kind of put your head down and you're just getting through it,
Mm-hmm.
And so for you felt kind of this resurgence of creativity and ambition and energy that it sounds like you didn't have before, that had kind of been tamped down going through all of that.
Right.
And
so here I come.
That directly impacts not just your emotional health, but your physical health. Talking about how you feel more ambitious and motivated to do things healthy for our bodies. It's amazing how, like, just the emotional situation you may be in, how much that affects your day-to-day choices, your minute-to-minute choices.
Yeah, because we've spent a lot of time on these podcasts talking about all of the mental energy that goes into weight loss. And, obviously, that even for a healthy person, like if you're mentally healthy and stable and you've got all this support, it's still difficult to put all of the energy into what's needed to really focus on, long-term health. So you start to take that away. You start to subtract from that health, the mental and emotional health. And then it's like all the physical stuff that you have to do, like planning and, cooking your meals ahead of time and budgeting all of it. And, like all of that is just that's going to fall to the wayside,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's challenging too, because you think about situations that can be really unhealthy, that not only are they typically unhealthy, but they usually are also accompanied with a lot of actual kind of stress and overwhelm. And so in addition to the toxicity, you have, thinking about a job situation, there's the actual work that has to be done, and then dealing with and managing all of that other stuff. And so it's kind of like a double whammy to your psyche almost. And I think the same with relationships, because again, like I think you start to view yourself differently than you really are as a person, and then that changes your behaviors. I was talking to somebody a couple weeks ago who he has been working really hard on weight loss and health for a year or two, and has made a lot of successes. And he's noticing that, like, how he dates and communicates with women is different, but he's noticed there are a couple women that like try to force food on him, or people that he'll date that tell him, oh, you don't need to work out. And what he's realizing is that he really needs somebody that is matching kind of his current goals. And the ones that don't match those goals and that actually run contrary to that kind of create that situation again, that toxic situation, when it becomes this demanding situation. And so, part of, Lisa, you were talking about recognizing toxicity. That made me think that part of that is, when goals are not aligned, there's some evidence that something's off, and that could be a problem.
Well, and in that situation, is that person toxic, or they just are, that person's probably not an inherently bad person. They're just not the right one for us, and even though, like, we still, but that doesn't mean that we, don't need to let them go,
Well, that's exactly right. I think that, that concept of letting go, that it's easy to think of, conceptualizing like in a relationship, like one person is the bad person and one person is the good person. But really, sometimes I think toxicity can develop because there are two people that are not a right fit for each other at the time.
Right.
And need to step away. And when that doesn't happen, then all the things that don't fit and aren't a good thing kind of create this system that's unhealthy,
Well, and I used to think, that that stepping away from a relationship because I felt like I wasn't getting enough out of it, like that sounds very selfish. And I've had friendships that I've stepped away from, or that I've, tried to phase. If you watch Friends, try to phase them out. Um, and I always
It's not
felt
a
very
good podcast
selfish
if
doing
there's not a
that.
Friends reference.
I know, right?
Sorry, go
We
ahead.
should have our favorite Friends episode. That would be fun.
That would be fun.
Anyway, that feels selfish to talk about, like I'm leaving this because I'm not getting enough out of it, or I'm having to give more. Like it's not a give and take, it's a me always giving. But as I've hit my 30s now, I've determined that my well-being is a priority, because my well-being is what's going to enable me to live longer. It's going to enable me to be around my family longer. Like, and if that means like you break up with someone, or you stop talking to a family member, or you phase a friend out, like it's painful, but it's better for you, and that's okay.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like, so the balance here is, what comes to mind is like, we're in such kind of a, I don't know, we're in kind of a culture of sort of, I should only do what's good for me and nobody else sort of a thing. And I want to make sure that, like, Heidi, because I don't think that's what you're saying at all, that it's not about just like, all I care about is myself, because you do put effort into having good relationships and really focusing on the relationships that that you value in your life and stuff like that. But there is a point where you kind of, you get to the point where it's like, okay, like I've done all the things that I can do. I've tried to nurture this, there's some reason why this isn't good for probably either side of the relationship. Right.
Yeah,
and
no,
it's a better game if to leave it.
exactly. And to me, relationships, they're a give and take, right? And sometimes you give more, because I mean that they're a pendulum swing. Sometimes you need more and sometimes you give more. Like that's okay. But as long as there's like that back and forth nature, that someone else is, I had a friend who every time we talked, she talked about herself the entire time and never asked me how I was. And I'm talking years and years and years of having a friendship with this person, that finally I realized, like, this is taking a lot of emotional capacity that I just don't have. And we don't see each other every day. It's okay if we step away and we don't talk that frequently. And so to me, it's more like it should be a give and take. And if you're only ever giving,
right,
ever, and you can't think of a time that like you've ever took anything from the relationship or you've gotten anything out of it, like it's okay that they make different friends and you make different friends.
Right.
And I think that, I think family is important, but if there's a family member who's similar, like it's okay that you take a step back and you see them only at reunions,
Right.
Or not. I don't really go to reunions.
I'm concerned that Heidi's going to phase me out.
That's right. I was thinking how Rebecca, the person who's always giving in our relationship, if anything, I'm the one being phased out because I'm constantly asking Rebecca for stuff. In fact, yesterday I called her about my dentist appointment. I told her about my dentist appointment for 30 minutes, and then I said, "I'm home. I've got to go. We'll talk about you some other time." And I hung up. So
we have a good balance, Heidi. We're good.
Rebecca, you wouldn't have any friends that you could talk to anymore if it was only about the people that you're not giving all the time to.
Oh my gosh, you guys are getting ridiculous. Thank you. No, but I think that I appreciate the point and the distinction, because one of the struggles that I have with this concept of being willing to walk away from situations that are not healthy, that are truly on a cellular level that are not healthy, is that I believe in relationships, and I believe in the idea that people can change, and I believe in the power of forgiveness, and so all of that is true, and yet there's a point at which if the other person is not, like Heidi, I think you had mentioned, is not being introspective, is not seeking to change, is not wanting to change, and we're talking about a friendship or a dating relationship or a work environment, then being able to walk away. In my mind, I see marriage a little bit differently. Not that you don't, it's never okay it's always okay to leave an abusive situation. I don't want to ever say anything about that. But I think that at the point that you've made either a lifelong or an eternal commitment to somebody, the weight of that looks a little bit different than simply a friendship. But I think that, you've got to find ways of making sure that you're healthy and strong and able to kind of manage through situations until you are at a place like Lisa, you've been able to do, where you're able to kind of get up and walk away.
Yeah, this is important too because. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say it's important because it's this concept that I've become aware of recently, and Rebecca, I've talked to you about it. This concept of advocating for yourself, like that's not a phrase I ever used to say, but I've been in some situations where I've learned that that's one of the ways that you kind of measure health, right? Mental health and emotional health is that you're advocating for yourself. And I realized that's, it's one thing to be, it's not that you're being pushy and all the time saying I have to have things my way or the highway, but this concept that like you should be able in any relationship that's healthy, you should be able to sort of jump in and at least have your needs acknowledged or, work towards understanding. And when you don't, when you're in a position where you just don't feel that you can do that, that's probably a sign that it's at least an unbalanced relationship and maybe even a toxic relationship. But I think that for some people, it's especially when you're in this scenario, it's very, very difficult to kind of to really truly stand up for yourself, right? You just don't want to. There's some balance of power or some reason, some consequence that you're trying to avoid. If it's an abusive relationship, it's because you don't want the abuse, right? So that's where, whatever it takes, I feel like if you're in that scenario, my heart hurts for anybody that is in that scenario, finding a way to leave it, you have to, you have to have the strength to find a way to walk away, whatever it is. But I think recognizing it is the first step, because a lot of times I think we put up with stuff a lot, and I think women do that in general, but not just women, but we kind of just put up with stuff because we're like, well, at least I've got this going, and at least I get this out of it, and we don't recognize how bad it is. But then once you've done that, it's like reaching out and finding a way to leave it, which is easier said than done. I think that's the only solution, to Heidi's point.
Mm-hmm. I'm aware of the fact that what we're talking about is not directly tied to weight loss, but it's something we're talking about. And one of the things that, we've been talking about is that our podcast, we're not, we don't have all the facts about everything, and we don't lose weight the quickest, but we're authentic and we're genuine, and we're willing to share and talk about things that are going on in our lives and how we've been impacted as a result of that. And part of that is talking about things when they are good and when we've had success, and part of it is talking about times that things have been really hard and really overwhelming. And I think we've all shared different experiences that we've had where things have been hard. And I guess I'm feeling really appreciative, Lisa, of your willingness to talk about what it kind of the difference in feeling between feeling kind of oppressed and then feeling freed and like you have the ability to grow, and how that is making a difference on just, in the last few days as you're going through this, how it's making a difference on yourself and the goals that you have moving forward, and your willingness to talk about the fact that this was a really not just challenging situation. This was I don't know the right word, but it was overwhelming.
Well, and it is related to weight loss, right? Sorry, Heidi, did I interrupt you?
I was just gonna say that weight loss isn't a silo. I think that's where we will fail, is if we think that weight loss is in this one category of our life or this one silo of life. But everything that we do and everyone that we interact with affects how successful we are in our journey of weight loss and our journey to be healthy, and not just healthy, physically, but emotionally. And the healthier we are emotionally, I think the more likely we are to be healthy physically.
Mm-hmm. That's what I was going to say, but you said it better.
We all have our days. Yeah, no, I think that this is an important topic, and I'm glad that we talk about things that aren't just directly something that you would typically see in like a weight loss book or something. I think that being able to explore other topics and pondering them throughout the week helps me think about things in a different way and helps me, I don't know, view my life from a different lens to help my journey.
Yeah.
I guess
Well, I think
I've
one of the
started to
things
feel more holistic about this whole journey. You know, it kind of started with I want to lose weight, but I've started to feel like this is more than just how much I am on a scale. This is more about like how do I feel, you know? And
Right.
and am I able to run around and be happy? And that means not just being able to run around, but being happy, you know? And so I guess I've just started to be a lot more, I don't know, global in how I'm thinking about my journey.
you and Weight Watchers together, that's the move Weight Watchers is making.
That's what they want to do. I haven't seen how they're doing it exactly, but I've heard
Did
that
you
that's what
hear
they're
that
trying to do.
their stock went down 7% this last quarter?
Oh,
No.
Oprah's gonna be
Yeah.
poor.
Yeah, I'm sure Oprah's really. You guys are killing me.
Well, I think one thing that I've benefited from as we talk about these things is just the idea of reducing some of the shame around the things that we're talking about. I think one thing I've become aware of in the last couple of years of my life is how much I feel embarrassed or ashamed about. I feel embarrassed about a lot of things that's really unnecessary to feel embarrassed about. And I think weight is one of those things. I think struggling in employment or in relationships, those are other areas where it's like, oh, I can't talk about when things aren't going well. I only can talk about when things, are building and successful. And that's inaccurate and a fallacy. And that the time that I need the most support is the time that I'm struggling. If I'm not willing to talk about it because I feel like I have to keep it hidden because I'm ashamed of it, then I'm also cutting off potential support that's going to help me to get through that in a healthier way. And so I've appreciated kind of the ability to talk about the good, bad, and the ugly, and to hear about, y'all's good, bad, and uglies, because I think that it's just helpful in bringing things into the light.
So the thing that I just feel like, to piggyback on that, Rev, that I feel like I need to say, and I don't know if it's because someone needs to hear it, but I feel like one thing that helps when you're in this kind of relationship that we've been talking about is to have an objective third party look at the situation and kind of let you see what they see. And I feel like that can come in a lot of different forms. It can be a friend, it can be a family member that you trust, it can be a counselor. Speaking of shame, a lot of people don't want to go talk to a counselor because they're like, I don't need to talk to a counselor. I'm fine, And there's nothing wrong with that. If you need to go talk to somebody, then go talk to somebody. But I feel like if you're not sure if there's something in your life that you need to change that's causing some of the things that we've been talking about, then go find somebody that can be a good objective third party and talk to them about it, whoever it is, and at least do that in the least to help you take that first step of understanding, and then you can go from there. But it feels really important that we be willing to let someone else shed a light on the scenario and see it a little bit differently maybe than how you're seeing it.
Love that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
There's my soapbox about that.
Well, any additional thoughts or final words about our topic or about things in general as we kind of wrap things up?
Not for
More
me,
to come from me. I'm so excited. More stuff coming. More blogging.
Lisa's got all the
energy
and the enthusiasm.
I'm back, guys.
So, Lisa, you had mentioned, actually, that reminds me, you had mentioned going back and listening to your podcast from before. As you kind of reflect back, do you think you had any idea that things were as bad as, I don't know the right phrasing for this, do you think that you knew at the time that things were as bad as they were, that they were impacting you to that degree now that you've kind of reflected back and listening to the podcast?
Not at first. I'm actually kind of surprised it took me so long, because I'm surprised because I started off thinking I'm going to just power through. And it took just build up before I was like, I can't take this anymore. And now I wish that I sooner would have come to the conclusion that this is bad. So that's the challenge for next time I find myself in this situation, is walk away sooner.
Mm. Well, I think it's challenging because, you're a self-aware individual, and to feel like it was hard to even recognize at that time, I can appreciate that adds to the challenge to maybe recognize when you're in an unsafe situation or a toxic situation.
Yep.
Well, thank you, Lisa, for being willing to kind of talk through your situation. For those of you that are listening, thank you always for listening. And we always get so excited when we look at the numbers and see how many people listen to what we said. And when people comment and tell us what their experiences, it also, again, feels very validating and is reminded that we're not the only ones that go through it. And I guess I'm curious to, other things that you guys have recognized when you've been in a toxic situation, and what's allowed you to get out of it. And how do you kind of have the power to move forward? So I hope you guys have an awesome week. Be sure to check us out on eatcrunchy.com, and we'll see you later.